Okay, catching up on some GAC. This one is pretty old against the guilty. ShutokoJohnson, he's a buddy too. He's in one of the maws. I don't know who's in what maw anymore. But enough about Galaxy of Heroes. I cracked myself up. Today is. What the fuck day is it? I don't even know. Tuesday. That's it? Jesus Lord. Tuesday, the 26th. Markets open today. That's right, it did open today after the holiday weekend. Holy tomorrow. Markets were exuberant today on more coronavirus vaccine hopes. Novavax said that they're going to start their phase 1 trials. There were some negative points, well, comparatively negative points during the day. Looks like the United States might sanction some Chinese officials over the handling of Hong Kong. I mean, I don't really have a position on mainland China and Hong Kong and their tensions. It shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone because mainland China, at least the government, firmly believes and asserts that there is one China, and they kind of act as though they have dominion and sovereignty over Hong Kong. And don't forget some of the other islands. I mean, there's a reason why if you call a Taiwanese person Chinese, they'll say, no, I'm Taiwanese. But if you ask the Chinese government, Taiwan is part of China. So that is akin to what is going on in Hong Kong. Hong Kong obviously was a British protectorate for the longest time and was given back to the Chinese. Hong Kong is still very British in a number of ways. I mean, Hong Kong, if you look at the city-state island of Hong Kong, I mean, they are pretty self-sufficient. A lot of money in Hong Kong comes out of Hong Kong. Also, this is an appropriate conversation because ShutokoJohnson is the son of a Hong Kong billionaire. No exaggeration. I know that for a fact. But Hong Kong has been autonomous. I mean, honestly, before the British relinquished control of it, certainly after the British relinquished control of it, Hong Kong has done very well for itself. I mean, if you look at Hong Kong versus mainland China, Hong Kong is a lot cleaner. Obviously, they have a lot more money, a lot more business. Maybe they don't have the same type of industry, so to speak, as mainland China in terms of industrial, work going on. There aren't as many factories and certainly aren't as many farms in Hong Kong. Hong Kong is a very white-collar business city-state, but they've done extremely well for themselves, and maybe mainland China wants to have a little bit more control over them. Not maybe, they do want to have more control over them. Anyway, all this to say that there are rising tensions yet again with China and the United States. So that took a little bit of wind out of the sails in the market in the last hour of trading. But still, the markets did very, very, very well today on hopes of reopening. And there were a couple of numbers that were surprisingly, they were surprising numbers to the upside. Housing starts, home sales were up quite a bit, so the builders were actually looking pretty good for most of the day. Home Depot is still hovering around its all-time high, its pre-corona high. Home Depot has done extremely well. I think it will continue to do extremely well because the numbers are showing even more so than a couple weeks ago that people are leaving the cities and are flocking. There's a mass exodus to the suburbs. Um, yeah, everyone's just trying to get the fuck out of the city. Do I think that it's overblown? Maybe, but I mean, who wants to be on top of one another? And who wants to be on top of one another when there is a pandemic that could very easily infect your whole building? Forget about your family, your whole building. So people are flocking to Long Island, Connecticut, at least from New York City, Long Island, Connecticut, New Jersey. So those numbers were interesting. Consumer sentiment has actually been a little bit better than I think anyone really could have expected. That does not necessarily mean that things are going to go back to normal, but people are rather hopeful um, that things will slowly get better, especially as more things reopen. It seems as though people, for the most part, are reopening in a at least somewhat measured way. The exceptions, of course, being the beach communities. I'm sure if you even got accidentally looked at the news, you saw beaches covered in people. Um, Not the best idea, but at least they're outside in the sun, where at least a few scientists have said it is less likely to contract or be exposed to coronavirus uh, because of UV and because open air, you're not in a confined space. A little bit easier to avoid contracting the virus. So that's good. But all the same, I would not want to be on a crowded beach right now. I think that that is an unnecessary risk given the circumstances. Um, yeah, so another company, like I said, Novavax, is going to start phase one trials. There are really about a dozen companies that either have started or uh, imminently intend to start phase one trials on potential vaccines. Everyone has been saying the more quote unquote shots on goal, the better, and that is absolutely true. Um, Watching CNBC, a couple of contributors pointed out that, even if one company comes up with a vaccine first, that doesn't mean that the other ones are shot, because one company's vaccine may be better to treat elderly people. One company's vaccine may be better to treat younger people, or people with diabetes, or people with heart conditions, or different ethnicities. Who knows? I mean, there's a reason why there are many, maybe not so much with vaccines, but if you look at rheumatoid arthritis, for instance, which is a very bad autoimmune disease, very common amongst Jewish women. Um, my entire family have rheumatoid. My brother has it. My father had it. My late sister had a very similar disease, which is actually even more rare, scleroderma, also an autoimmune disease. But rheumatoid arthritis is treated in many different ways. One of them you may have heard of, Plaquenil, hydroxychloroquine, that the president has been touting. Hydroxychloroquine was at first an anti-malaria drug. Turns out it also has the potential to treat rheumatoid. Uh, Plaquenil, hydroxychloroquine, did not work for my dad, but it works for my brother. My brother takes Plaquenil every day for his RA. My dad took Enbrel for his arthritis. He had 4 types. Some people take methotrexate. Works for some people, many people, in fact, but methotrexate almost killed my dad. So just because one company comes up with a vaccine first does not kill the other vaccine companies in the crib. Like I said, it could be used to treat different demographics or just different people. Everyone's body responds differently to treatment, even in getting sick. Some people, are getting violently ill with corona, and some people are having a headache, and that's it. Um, my fiance being one of them. She had like a headache and a backache for like 2 days. Um, Never coughed, never had a fever, never had trouble breathing, and then she comes back with the antibodies. So yes, sure, she's extremely lucky, but everyone's body reacts differently to any number of different things. I saw an article today that certain health officials think that as many as 35% of people that contract coronavirus will be asymptomatic. That's both a very good and very bad thing. Very good because that brings the mortality rate down percentage wise considerably. Bad thing because a number of people are going to be asymptomatic, have no idea they have coronavirus, and may spread it to people that will not be asymptomatic, which is why you should fucking wear PPE, and why you should continue to social distance, and why you should continue to wash your hands. If even if you don't have coronavirus, but you touch something that has the virus on it still, just for argument's sake, and then you touch something else, like a door handle, and someone else touches the same door handle and it somehow transfers, look, is it likely? Probably not, but why take the risk? Just be smart about it. Be, have a modicum of respect, and just, do it. There's no reason not to be careful about your health. There are plenty of reasons not to be cavalier about your health, so don't be stupid. Don't be selfish, don't be stupid, don't think you're fucking Superman. Just do it, right? The sooner everyone does it, the sooner we can go back to normal. So just fucking behave yourself. Anyway, so stocks were crazy today. Last I looked, the futures were flat. Not that futures are really indicative of anything. You really can't let futures determine. Well, futures just really don't determine what's going to happen the next day. It's an implied open for the next day, but things change rapidly, both in futures and once the market opens. Disney is going to set forth its parameters for trying to reopen some of their parks. They have to get it approved by the government in Florida. So Disney stock did very well today as a result. Jamie Dimon, my favorite banker on Wall Street, had some good things to say about JP Morgan. I mean, obviously he runs JP Morgan, so he's going to have good things to say. But JP Morgan stock was up, I think, 7% today, which is tremendous, especially considering JP Morgan and the other financials have been lagging considerably against the broader market. Anecdotally, actually it's not even an anecdote, it is fully relevant. Incidentally, Jamie Dimon was still at the helm of JP Morgan Chase during the Great Recession, and JP Morgan Chase, of all the banks, was the only bank that did not require TARP assistance from the government. TARP, of course, being the Troubled Asset Relief Program. Jamie Dimon and JP Morgan Chase did not need, nor did they want money given to them by TARP, by the government, but the government said no. Everyone is taking TARP money. All the banks are taking TARP money. You take it. Again, JP Morgan didn't want or need the money, but they were forced to take it. And then they paid it back pretty much about as soon as they could, because they didn't need it, because their balance sheet was strong, even though they ended up having to take over Washington Mutual, which was a shitty bank that went insolvent as a result of a financial crisis, well, the Great Recession of '07, '08, '09. Even though JPM took over WAMU, they survived, they have thrived. Um, the only real blip on JP Morgan's historical radar was the London whale incident, wherein a trader lost, I think it was $8 or $10 billion in one day, and the market, or not the market, the stock price plummeted. If you look at JP Morgan, well, at the time, if you looked at JP Morgan's market cap and revenue, it was a pretty small number in comparison. It was a comparative drop in the bucket for JP Morgan. So I doubled down my holding in JP Morgan when that London whale shit happened. I think the stock dropped from 45 to like $30 or something like that in a day. So I doubled down, and the stock is in the 90s now. It was as high as 140 before Corona. We're going to say BC, before Corona. But I have full confidence in Jamie Dimon and JP Morgan Chase, so I own that. I added to that at the March lows. The only thing that could really derail JP Morgan coming back would be Jamie Dimon leaving, or God forbid getting sick, because he did have some heart trouble I think a couple of months ago, but he is back to, or seemingly back to, his old self, and he is pretty much unequivocally the best banker in the country. I was actually really hoping that he would become Treasury Secretary, but he is not the biggest fan of Trump, nor Trump his biggest fan. And Mnuchin is Treasury Secretary. But maybe in another administration, Jamie Dimon might get elevated to, or nominated to, Treasury Secretary, because I think he'd be really good, quite honestly. Yeah, markets were crazy. Really, really good. Might we give back some tomorrow? Probably. It would make sense for us to give some back tomorrow. But time will tell. I own Moderna. I bought Moderna. My cost was 30. It shot all the way up to 86 on an intraday last week or something like that. It's back down to the mid-high 50s. I had been scaling out of it on the way up. I put in an order after the market close to liquidate my Moderna holding tomorrow when the market opens up, no matter which way Moderna goes. I'm still up about 90% on what I have in there. I scaled out my entire initial investment, so I'm just playing with the house's money at this point. So that's never a bad time to get out, especially because while Moderna is still ahead, way ahead, in fact, of everybody else, there have been a few news pieces that have rattled investors in Moderna, including but not limited to the alleged distorted view of their phase 1 trial results, and the fact that the CEO has been scaling his stock out of the company as the stock price has been rising, which honestly, regardless of the reason, doesn't look good to investors, so they are not going to want to chance it. Even if the CEO had those trades locked in well before the results, well before the share price rocketed up, whatever the reason is, perception is often reality for market traders, and the CEO unloading shares as the stock has gone up has scared enough people to the point where Moderna's share price is actually lower now than where it was before it announced its positive phase 1 results. So I made enough money on it. I'm not going to be greedy. I still hope that they, produce their vaccine first, but I think that I am going to take the money and run. And look at that, good timing.